Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. Influential Entrepreneurs is sponsored by Marketing Huddle, where we build an authority positioning portfolio for entrepreneurs that sells for you using podcast and TV interviews and guaranteed press coverage. For more information, go to MikeSaunders360.com. Today we have with us Darius Ross, who's a business consultant, motivational speaker, and author. Darius, welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, Mr. Saunders. How are you?
Hey, doing awesome. I'm excited to talk with you. I know you've got a book and you talk about mindset and dealing with adversity. And before we dive into those topics, give us a little bit of your story and background and how did you come to these, the realization that these topics need to be addressed?
I actually came from an interesting background on the south side of Chicago. And from that experience, the whole mindset of surviving in what was considered the 1980s when gang violence and the various gang organizations were flourishing, and just surviving that and going to a seminary at the time, Quigley South, and just realizing that you have to have a pretty strong constitution to maintain and sustain within those environments. Because within probably a 7-year time period, I lost about 200 friends to gang violence.
Wow. Boy, yeah. I mean, how do you push through that without feeling like the waves just crush you?
One of the biggest things was just dealing with finding out and discovering you have PTSD. It's not just soldiers, It's also in the inner city, where inner city young people, a lot of reasons why they're acting out is based upon what they're experiencing. They've seen so much blood and violence, then they begin to act out what they've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I tell you, sometimes it is also just that glimmer of hope that you bring to someone and help them realize that there is hope. So talk a little bit about how you work with people on helping them navigate adversity.
One of the number one things is just realizing where you are. You have to realize where you are and what you've been through. And so often people hide behind the mystique. They call it imposter syndrome, whatever you would like to call it. Fake it till you make it. But a lot of times you spend so much time hiding behind who you want to be, the clothes, the allure of the fashion and the styling and so forth, and striving for a certain position, that you lose sight of who you are and what you're going through. And so all of a sudden this mental issue comes into the mental breakdowns because you've gone through so much to get there, but you miss out on what caused you to want to go that far because you neglected your mental health.
Yeah. Well, where do you start when you're talking with someone that you know that they've neglected that mental side of things? Where do you start without almost offending them to say it's a mental aspect?
One of the things that I've done is that I found out I was not the coach for everyone and I was not the speaker for everyone. So sometimes I have to say to folks right off the bat, my language is going to get a little vulgar and I'm going to get a little intense because I say to you, stop BSing yourself. You've been the same place I've been in a lot of different ways. Now tell me your story. Let's get past all the titles you have, your background and so forth. What's your story? Did you have a father in the house? Was there drug addiction? Was there alcohol abuse? Was there violence? Tell me your story. I don't want to hear about your accolades. Get past the BS. That's the key.
And almost it sounds like you are saying you help them come to the realization themselves. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. It's that acknowledgement of accountability.
Yeah. You hear this so many times in self-help and personal development, but it's like when you stop blaming other people and go, I am here where I'm at because of me and decisions I've made, that begins the path in the right direction. Have you found that as well?
I go even a step further. I tell them right off the bat, you're your own worst enemy, because sometimes the things that have happened to you before you even got on this planet. It may have been a generational curse. People want to say that I say that's a bad word, but there's sometimes things in your generation, in DNA, that have happened. And then when you couple that with the decisions that you make, now you have the perfect recipe for a nightmare.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a really good point. And the old saying, you don't know what you don't know, really seems to come into effect there, because these people that are dealing with this, it might be in the past and they might not really correlate it. But then once you, from an outside perspective, see it, bring it to their attention, now all of a sudden it's known and they can start working toward that.
Oh, absolutely. Because one of the biggest things is basically getting into a position where I ask questions about who and what was in your background. What uncle did this? What aunt did this? How was grandpa? How was grandma? Give me some of those insightful stories as to what happened, what you heard over the kitchen table, what was being
Yeah.
whispered.
Yeah, they might not even, I mean, they might just be talking, telling a story, not even relate it to, ooh, this is an issue or an opportunity. This is something that is leading to something else, but you're listening through ears that are fine tuned to watch for that, right?
Correct. Because I found myself being in the same place. It's like there are certain things that you hear in your own story growing up as a little kid, and you're like, well, that was odd. He kept falling down the stairs. Well, he was falling down the stairs because he had alcohol abuse. But you didn't
Mm,
correlate that to that when you were a kid.
hmm So what is it that you think is the reason why most individuals don't understand how to seize opportunities or blessings? Meaning they might see it, but they're going in 100 miles an hour in 100 different directions. They might not even be aware that it's an opportunity.
Primarily because you're tripping over your own blessings. Most people have faith, and in that faith, sometimes they say faith is a mustard seed. So some opportunities are hidden. And I
Yeah.
always say, look up at the opportunity, look up and see where you are. I'll give a good example of it as a short story. I was a kid going to Bogan High School out on the Southwest side, and I didn't want to go to high school. My dad had got laid off from his job. So at the end of the day, I ended up at Bogan High School, and the counselor one day said to me, you know what? Why don't you come into this office? So he lays his big bag of money on the counter, and he says, okay, this is the money they're giving you to go to school here for they were desegregating basically. So we were the first series of black students going there. So all of a sudden he says, you want a job? And I'm thinking, I don't want to work at McDonald's. He says,
Mm.
are you interested in a job? I'm like, certainly. So I ended up at First Chicago. Now, had I turned down that opportunity thinking it was going to be McDonald's, I would have never gotten to corporate America. But
Yeah.
it was just interesting how it happened. I hated to go to the school, but the school transitioned me to be able to go to where it was because I was so privileged in going to Quigley. I'm thinking Quigley is the be all the end all, but it was not. There was another opportunity, but I hated it. But I didn't visualize that there would be another opportunity that would be better going along the way.
It's almost like one door of opportunity opens so that another door of opportunity can open, and you can only see the first door in front of you.
Correct. And it's
Yeah.
like stumbling over the essentials. It's like you don't really look at basically the moments when things change in your life. I mean, when we look at things like Home Depot got started because the guys there, Blanks and Marks, basically got tired of dealing with True Value and how they were operating. Microsoft got started because Bill Gates saw what IBM had as a piece of software that was no good to them. Sometimes opportunity comes from the things that you look up and you don't see that it's a piece of chewing gum. That chewing gum might be your meal, but to somebody else, it's like
Yeah.
it's a piece of chewing gum.
Yeah. So how do you take advantage of opportunities in without feeling overwhelmed? Meaning, if you start looking, you could see opportunities all around you. You could potentially even interpret many things as an opportunity, which might not be an opportunity itself, and you could feel overwhelmed. So you could also take what you're talking about here, seizing opportunities, to the extreme and be running around chasing your tail. So how do you assess?
You evaluate your tool set. What do I really have to offer? And if I don't have it, do I have the leadership capacity to bring people in the mix that can help make this possible? Sometimes that's what one of the greatest things about entrepreneurship is that you're getting somebody else to work for you because most of the time, most entrepreneurs really don't want to work hard. That's why you leave corporate America. So how can you turn around, take your tool set, either leadership? Do you have a certain skill set that maybe you're a welder, but you don't know how to get a welding shop? So is there somebody out there that has a 401k or some money they want to put aside to help you open your 401k? Your welding shop. So sometimes it's just that looking at your tool set of what you have in your box of your background and how you can actually optimize what you have. Sometimes we overlook the basics, and we spend so much time, as you said, looking for everything else that we shouldn't be looking at.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And also, I know that this might sound obvious, but sometimes it's just practice
Mm-hmm.
and taking advantage of something or noticing something and going, ooh, this made me feel, overwhelmed. So sometimes it's just getting your footing by experience.
Correct.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your book that you're working on, TPS.
It's called Mastering the TPS Blueprint, Transforming Trauma into Triumph. And what I'm dealing with there, the TPS symbols represent timing. It's at a particular point to take advantage of the time. And synchronicity is occurring at the same time and where things just line up, and ultimately seeking precision, meaning the exact accuracy of when you can actually precisely hit something right on target. So I'm talking about the blueprint of how often we miss out on opportunities because we don't look at timing, synchronicity, and precision. And a lot of it has to do with consistency. How do you consistently keep on looking at those three acronyms and find your way and find your path? Because it comes down to just that. Even when we look at something as simple as war, when we look at what happened in the militaries in World War II, if there had not been a situation of North Africa and the Western Front of the Soviet Union, the entire war would be different now. But they got bogged down in the snow and they got bogged down in the sand. So it changed things. That was a TPS and real practicality.
So with these three pillars, I'll call them timing, synchronization, precision. Is that the order that you teach that they should go in, or are they just three topics that are really, really important?
No, exactly that order. You
Okay.
have to look at your timing and you have to look at being in sync. You have to be aligned. That's the most important thing. The timing is the moment. And then ultimately speaking of precision is the ability to operate a certain way. Like, for example,
Yeah.
now there will be more millionaires made, billionaires, and there will ultimately be a trillionaire made over the next 4 or 5 years in this political environment. So people aren't really looking at how things are going haywire. But in that haywireness, it's like, do you see the opportunity of that TPS working to your advantage? You know, when things are bad, somebody's still making money, regardless.
Um, I wonder if you would find that TPS applies to personal affairs more frequently than business, or is it pretty even?
It's both.
Yeah.
Even in dating, I have another auxiliary book that's coming out later on with people dating over 50. And it's the same thing. If you're in a situation, and I said this kind of funny, I did a excerpt about after COVID. I said, gentlemen, you're going to find there are going to be more women that are going to be looking at you after COVID. Sure enough, it was because guess what? They've been tied up for 3 or 4 years. So
Yeah.
therefore, you're looking pretty good right about now. You're looking like a morsel. Okay. So it is the same thing. It's like you have to look at even in personal, it's the same thing. If you're off, everything is off. If you're
Yeah.
right, it's there. I mean, we can look at something as simple as this whole political environment. It took 4 times to become president. He made it happen. But again, it was based upon the timing, the precision, and the synchronicity. He did not stop until things lined up.
You know, when I see precision in that order, it makes me think of the saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. And you might
Correct.
have the right timing and synchronization, but if you don't execute it precisely,
That's
you've
right.
blown all of the work in recognizing the timing and synchronization. So talk a little bit about that proper precision.
Okay, I'll use it in the book. There's a piece of art that I'm using like a sniper, and it's a bad antidote, but I use the sniper as an example in the scope. And in the scope, it says goals. Okay, so as a result, if you are precise, you are there at the exact time, you are aimed, you are waiting, and you are completely organized with all of your toolbox and everything in place. Boom, there it is. But if one thing is off, one moment that it's supposed to be 11:59 and you're there at 12:01, done. You missed it. So sometimes you have to be just that way. You
Yeah.
have to look at everything as it has to be on point. You cannot be
Yeah.
like, well, traffic is there. No, no, no. You have to plan for traffic. You have to plan for everything.
You know, It makes me think too. One of my daughters is an engineer and she was doing coding work. And I remember when she was in grad school watching some of the assignments she was doing, and you would just look at this screen of gobbledygook and, she would stare at it for, working at this one thing and find the problem of there was one, like a period or a bracket that was
Mm-hmm.
off. And finding that and fixing that makes everything work. And it's that precision, is that knowing what needs to be done, but just making sure that all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed. And even in your interpersonal communications, if you're sending out an email and say, okay, here's the link to whatever the case is, check that link first. Just make sure that all of the things you're doing is precise, because it really is a reflection on you personally and professionally. Have you found that as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I look at it as something people can kind of focus their attention on. If you look at the implosion of buildings, when they're actually taking buildings down after demo work, everything is calculated to the T when they do it, right? The explosive experts. But if one of those explosive devices is off one fraction, the building just stands there. And you've seen it on TV. Sometimes the building is still standing. It's like, wait a minute, now we got it right. No, you didn't. You're off a fraction. And that's how intense it has to be. You cannot do it anything differently. And I know from a professional basis, if I miss a mark, I can't come back to the client and say, well, I gave you perfect advice. I go, did you follow it exactly as I said? You go, well, not exactly. Well, there's a problem. You didn't follow it exactly.
And the interesting revelation I would also submit is it doesn't have to be a massive offset in precision. It can be just that small, tiny bit. And I've heard the example, and you probably have as well, like if an airplane is just off course by just 1%, 1/10 of 1% over the course of, hours and hours of flying, you're going to arrive in a whole different city. So it's not like a 90-degree, deviation. It's small, tiny deviations that really add up.
Well, absolutely. I agree with it. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because so often in my own life, it amounted to just that. It could be something as simple as I've had a funny thing, right? Going to the gas station once upon a time and not having, when you're financially just starting out, you don't have the right amount of money. And this one time I went there, right? Went to all three gas pumps, stick the card in, and nothing happened. Got to the fourth one for whatever reason. Again, it's a blessing, God, whatever you want to call it. Put the gas card in there. Was no money on the card, and the pump worked. But again, off one fraction, I could have turned around and went around the block, come back, and wouldn't work. So that's how unique sometimes things are.
Yeah. And probably another word that starts with P, like I'm looking at precision, but persistence and perseverance. Right. Once you have that timing down and the precision down, it's not just one and done. It is just keep on keeping on and keep plugging away. That ties back into your point earlier you made about faith.
Oh, yeah. You have to be prayerful and basically focused on that precision and the persistency, even to this thing of being dogmatic. I find you have to be almost dogmatic as an entrepreneur to achieve your goals. Sometimes people will say that you're crazy, you're idiotic, this is insane, but you're not. But here's what I say to counter that point. Sometimes you have to know in all that dogmaticness when you yourself are off and you have to make adjustments. So that's the thing about entrepreneurs also. Some of them are so dogmatic, they don't realize they're failing. So the thing that I counter to that is know when you're failing and then understand that dogmaticness has to change to something else.
Yep, exactly. Well, I tell you what, Darius, has been really great chatting with you here. If someone is interested in learning more about your work, what you do, and picking up a copy of your book, what's the best way that they can do that?
They can reach me through DariusARoss.com. That's DariusARoss.com. And then there's another site that's coming up now, which is DariusWrites.com. And also they can get all the books on all the book platforms from Barnes & Noble to Amazon and so forth.
Excellent. Well, Darius, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a real pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Saunders. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.